Good afternoon. My name is Matt Chase. I'm the Executive Director of the National Association of Counties. And on behalf of NACO and the Council of State Governments Justice Center, I want to thank you for taking time this afternoon to come and talk about this very important issue of mental illness and substance abuse conditions in America's jails. And you might be wondering why state and local governments are coming together on this. We're going to talk about that today, and I want to give a little primer before we get to our distinguished guests today to talk about why this issue needs to elevate to the national level. So on behalf of CSG and NACO, thank you again. America's counties, we have 3,069 across this country. We have a $500 billion a year budget across all county governments. And our two most pressing issues deal with health and justice. Each year, county governments spend over $70 billion on justice and public safety, as well as another $70 billion on health care for citizens, oftentimes health care in America's jails. So essentially, we've been using America's county jails and other local jails as our mental health institutes. If you want to look at the numbers, each year, about 8.5 million individuals become inmates and guests of the county jails at about 11.5 million visits. So obviously, individuals are coming back more than once. This past week, we had a board meeting for the NACO. We have a 128-member board, hence the gray hair. But we did a real live polling of our members to ask them what percentage of their current inmates did they think had serious mental illness. Over 25% of them estimated over 60% of their inmates have serious mental illness and co-determined as substance abuse. So this is a real significant issue for counties. We are creatures of state government. We're essentially the administrative arms for the state. And so we have to work in collaboration with state government throughout the court system and the legal system. We're really honored to be partnering with the Council of State Governments, along with a whole host of other groups who we'll talk about this afternoon. It's really my honor at this time to turn the podium over to Judge Steve Leifman, who's the Associate Administrative Judge for the 11th Judicial Circuit in Florida. He's also on the board of the American Psychiatric Foundation. I would say one of his unofficial titles is a force of nature on this topic. He is a true national leader. He's passionate. He knows how this really affects families and communities, and he is just a great partner to have at the national level and brings great credibility. So, Judge Leifman.
Good afternoon, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. The real reason they asked me to speak today is because I'm probably the only judge in the United States who knows a little bit about mental illness, but has roots in both Minnesota and Florida. And so the next two speakers are from both places. On behalf of the American Psychiatric Foundation, I do want to thank NACO and the Council of State Government for their phenomenal leadership. We are thrilled to be partnering with both organizations as well as all the other organizations that are involved in this issue. I will tell you that when I became a judge, I had no idea I was actually becoming the gatekeeper to the largest psychiatric facility in the state of Florida. And sadly, that's the Miami-Dade County Jail, where there are 10 times as many people with serious mental illnesses than any state hospital in Florida. What most of my colleagues and I see in a day, we don't wish most people to have to see in a lifetime. We try to deal with the fallout of a horribly fragmented, antiquated, under-resourced system of care that often for us turns into an act of futility. We work with a system that sadly often tortures and re-traumatizes people with mental illnesses, not to mention one that wastes huge amounts of critical tax dollars. In my own community, we have over 20,000 people a year who at the time of their arrest need acute mental health care treatment. On any given day, we have about 1,400 people on antipsychotic medication, and my county spends $218,000 every single day. That's $80 million a year to warehouse people in conditions you wouldn't allow your dog to stay in. Speaking of costs, we worked very closely with one of our local universities, actually in Tampa. And we asked them to tell us who the highest utilizers of mental health and criminal justice services were in my community in Miami-Dade County. I waited and waited, and I finally got this amazing list. It had 97 people on the list. These were primarily men, primarily diagnosed with schizophrenia, who over a 5-year period were arrested 2,200 times. They spent 27,000 days in the Dade County Jail, 13,000 days in an emergency room or psychiatric facility, and cost taxpayers almost $13 million, and we got absolutely nothing for it. And on the state level, it is just as bad. We have between 150 and 160,000 people in Florida who at the time of their arrest need acute mental health care treatment. The police in my state handle more involuntary hospitalization calls than the total number of arrests for assault, burglary, and grand theft auto combined in a year. The fastest growing subpopulation in Florida's prisons are people with mental illnesses. While the general population in Florida's prisons have basically remained constant, the percentage of people with mental illnesses in our prison has grown by 178% over the last 12 years. It is growing so fast that Florida now has to consider building 10 new prisons just for the mental health population, which would cost us to build and operate 10 prisons over 10 years almost $3.5 billion. And there's clearly something very wrong with a society that's willing to spend more money to incarcerate people that are ill than to treat them. These individuals are not committing serious offenses. In fact, the vast majority of this population are in on low-level offenses, but have accumulated points in our point system and end up in prison for about 2.5 to 4 years and return to the same under-resourced, fragmented system of care that led them to begin with. Many of the laws and financing of mental health services were developed over 50 years ago. They were done before color TV, microwave ovens, and certainly computers. And unfortunately, we're using those same laws and system of finance to finance this system. We need to make change, and that's why this event is so remarkably important, and that's why we are so thrilled to be part of it. And that's why I'm so thrilled to introduce two heroes and champions that have made a huge commitment to take on this very complex, yet very fixable societal problem. I want to bring up Congressman Richard Nugent, who was elected in 2010 from the 11th Judicial Congressional District of Florida, who, as a former sheriff of Hernando County, knows firsthand what it's like to be a first responder for people with mental illnesses. In 2013, along with Senator Franken and Senator Johans and Congressman Scott, Congressman Nugent introduced the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Act, which provides resources for veteran treatment courts, increases focuses on resources and training for jails and prisons, and provides innovative training at all police academies. And in May, his amendment to the CJS Appropriations Bill increased funding for the Mentally Ill Offender Treatment and Crime Reduction Act, which was unanimously approved by the House. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Nugent. Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate it.
Well, you never want to follow a judge. I don't want to say that he stole all my thunder, but that's okay, Judge. I want to thank, first of all of you for being here today, and particularly the counties that are represented, the agencies that are represented. It is so important. When I was sheriff, I've been in law enforcement 38 years. I know I don't look it, but started outside Chicago, moved to Florida, and became a deputy sheriff, went up through the ranks, and became sheriff. We took the jail back from a private company one of my last years in office. And what I found was, I heard this from my other sheriffs within the state, is that we were becoming warehouses for those that have mental issues. We've criminalized mental health. And I saw it firsthand as sheriff, obviously, when we started paying the bills for the psychotropic drugs that we need to prescribe to those inmates to keep them in a sense where we could deal with them. And it was almost impossible. From a cost standpoint, for a county, and the judge hit it as Miami-Dade found out, 97 people accounted for that $13 million. 97. Now, there are some great programs which we should talk about. Pinellas County, Florida, which is the St. Petersburg area, actually started a program there that they reduced the recidivism rate by 87% by just using some common sense approaches in regards to dealing with the mentally ill, and particularly as it relates to law enforcement. So we need to look at those things that work and not try to keep doing the same things that we know don't work. And states have, and I used to complain about this as a deputy and as a chief of operations, the states have really cut back on what they spend to deal with the mentally ill. And so it falls back on the first responders. We don't have a choice. We can't say, listen, we're not going to take care of it. We have to respond, and then we have to deal with the crisis that we're faced with. So of those 3,000 offenders arrested in Pinellas County, they reduced the recidivism rate by 87%. So that means, like the judge talked about, those 97 individuals in Miami-Dade that accounted for $13 million in cost, they saved the taxpayers of that county, Pinellas County, a huge sum of money. And it really is important. That's the reason, while Senator Franken and I are probably a couple of odd fellows, because on most instances we won't agree. But on this one we do agree. And this is where bipartisanship really has to come together. We have the ability to change where we go forward. And we weren't able to do this in the last 2 years, but we picked up over 50 sponsors in the House and 250 sponsors outside organizations, from the national sheriffs, the major sheriff's associations, the chiefs of police, across the board. We have the opportunity, I think, in this new Congress to actually move the ball forward. I'm optimistic that we're going to get this done. It's important for folks back home. If you want to talk about the federal government, this is one area the federal government can actually make an impact for those people that we represent. And it's an unrepresented population. Typically, the mentally ill, folks don't want to talk about that issue. They don't want to direct any resources to that issue. County commissions don't really want to do it. But when they're stuck in jail and we have to provide the services to them, they don't have a choice but to provide it. And so we want to try to change that narrative. And we really want to talk about our veterans now who've gotten caught up into this. They didn't get there by choice either. They got there because they went and served their country. And they come back with a whole host of issues. Some, that have exasperated or increased because of their service to their country and the things that they've seen in their service. We want to make sure we take care of them. The judge mentioned that we were able to plus up a piece of legislation to actually add more money for those services. But it doesn't take the place of this reauthorization. And we are really going to fight tooth and nail, and this is where you come into it. As constituents, you all have elected officials that represent you up here in Washington, D.C., whether it's in the Senate or the House or both, obviously. You have the opportunity to reach out to them and tell them how important it is to you that they get on board and help us move this legislation through. And we've been doing that across the board with our friends across the aisle. Like I said, we have over 50 co-sponsors of the bill now in the House, and it's almost evenly split bipartisan-wise. The judge talked about this is important as it relates to training for our police officers. One of the things that we worked with NAMI back in my home community was to train those crisis response officers. So when they ran into a situation, and they did it routinely, that they had some more tools in their toolbox to deal with the issues that they had, to try to de-escalate what's going on. And it's so important. We see this today across the nation, complaints about police brutality and all those types of things. This is something that we have some ability to change. This is something that we have to, as a law enforcement community, reach out. And I think law enforcement is trying to do that, but we need help from the counties and from the state and the federal government. I'll be honest with you, I'm one that believes in smaller government, but I think this is one of those areas where the federal government does have the opportunity to put some seed money forward so communities can see for themselves the positives that come out of it and how they can save money within their own communities. And that seed money, of course, evaporates after a few years. But at least it gets that ability for communities to see what's necessary to be done. And that's all we ask. And so I think in the 114th Congress that starts rather shortly, let's see if we can get our business done this year. That's always a challenge up here. I've only been here 4 years, and I will tell you that if you've heard that this place might be a little dysfunctional, I can attest that it is very much that way. A little different than being sheriff, because I knew exactly what we had to do. We knew who the bad guys were, and we put them in jail. And what we're asking now is for help to deal with an issue that affects every county jail in the nation. There's not one that's not affected by this, no matter how large or small the institution may be. And so with that, I thank you for being here and your interest in this particularly important legislation. And once again, please reach out to your elected officials and tell them, hey, listen, we'd certainly like to see your name as a co-sponsor on that bill in the House and then also in the Senate. So thank you very much, and thank you today. Thank you.
Again, we want to extend our appreciation to Congressman Nugent. Once you're a sheriff, you're always a sheriff. So in county land, we're trained to call him sheriff. Even though he's in the House now, we want to really thank him for his service and his passion. If you notice, his bill is called the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Act. Collaboration is really key between state, counties, nonprofits, and our other partners, as well within county government, the different divisions and responsibilities within the county. At this time, I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Fred Osher, who's the Director of Health Services and Services Policy for CSG's Justice Center. He's going to provide an overview of the key challenges that counties face in identifying and addressing individuals with mental and substance abuse disorders in their jails.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Representative Nugent. Thank you to our partners at NACO and our partners in the audience. It's really an honor and a privilege to be here before you talking about an issue of significance to our country at this point in time. I get to use PowerPoint, so I'm going to move through some of these slides in a rather quick fashion. What I hope to do, is share with you a bit about understanding how pressing these issues are, to talk to you about knowing what's driving the overrepresentation of people with mental illnesses in our criminal justice system, to recognize the challenges that our counties face as one of the principal places where the action, where the rubber meets the road, to appreciate how much smarter that we've got in the last decade with a lot of innovation that's going on around the country and research that tells us what works for whom and under what circumstances. And lastly, a little pitch to convert these lessons that we've learned into systemic change at the county level. We know about large numbers of individuals in our criminal justice system, and on any given day, there are more people in our prisons than in our jails, about 1/3 to 2/3. However, the jails are the churning environment, and as referenced earlier, we have over 11 million individuals booked into our jails each year, as opposed to a little over 200,000 within our prisons, about 8.5 million, an unduplicated count, a rapid churning environment that exists at the county level. And this is not a random sample of our population. The circle on the right shows you that we have an estimated 5% of our general population that meet conservative criteria for a serious mental illness. But in a study that colleagues and I conducted several years ago in a couple of jails in Maryland and 3 in New York, at booking, 17% of those individuals met our criteria for serious mental illness. And just unpacking that number a little bit, that was 15% of the men booked into the jails and a stunning and staggering 31% of women booked into those facilities met criteria for serious mental illness. And both men and women, 3/4 of them also had a co-occurring substance use condition, which might have explained how they got there in the first place, but certainly complicated the return and stability within the community going forward. Some of the good news is that with crime rates dropping in many portions of our country, so too have some of the average daily populations within our jails. The bars that you're looking at on this graph are the number of people within our jail facilities. The blue line represents the change. The last year, a 2% drop in the number of individuals within our county jails. Unfortunately, that's not been true of all prisoners, all inmates within those facilities. In a study that we conducted a couple years ago in New York City at Rikers Island, what we saw was the population, average daily population, falling from over 13,000 to below 12,000, while at the same time the percentage of individuals with mental illnesses rose from 24% to 36%. I'm going to take an opportunity here, and I'm pleased that Senator Franken from Minnesota is here to join us. Senator Franken was elected to Congress in 2008. As a member of the Judiciary Committee, he understands the challenges confronting law enforcement officials, judges, corrections, and mental health professionals as they try to respond in an effective and comprehensive way to the needs of individuals with mental illness in our jail settings. He has continued his strong leadership on this issue by championing increased funding in the Mentally Ill Offender Treatment and Crime Reduction Act and sponsoring the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Act in 2013, two programs which will bring more resources to our communities to develop effective responses to individuals coming into criminal justice settings with mental illnesses. Please join me in recognizing and welcoming Senator Franken.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you for that kind introduction. And thank you all for being here today. I also want to thank Matthew Chase from the National Association of Counties and Michael Thompson from the Justice Center at the Council of State Governments for inviting me here today, and for all of your hard work on this issue. And I want to especially thank Florida Congressman Rich Nugent, who's worked so hard on this, and we've worked very closely together on mental health issues. I look forward to continuing that work in the next Congress. As today's event makes clear, mental health in the criminal justice system is not a partisan issue or divisive issue. Democrats and Republicans, police officers, prosecutors, defense attorneys, veterans organizations, and mental health advocates all agree that something is wrong when we use our criminal justice system as a substitute for a mental health system. The statistics are stark. In the nation's three biggest jail systems, approximately 11,000 prisoners undergo mental health treatment on any given day. The three largest state mental hospitals in the country, on the other hand, have a combined 4,000 beds. As Rick Stanek, who is the Hennepin County Sheriff, that's the largest county in my home state of Minnesota, put it, local jails are the largest mental health facilities in the state of Minnesota, and this holds true across the nation. Every day, our law enforcement officers are called upon to intervene in potentially life-threatening mental health crises, and our courts are overwhelmed with cases involving people with untreated mental health illnesses. This doesn't make sense for our public safety, and it certainly doesn't make sense for taxpayers who are stuck with the bills for overcrowded jails and the higher costs. In the face of these realities, we need to take a comprehensive approach. Elected officials and stakeholders at the local, state, and federal level must work together to address the unique needs of persons with mental health conditions in the justice system. We also must remember that our actions should help, not stigmatize, people with mental health issues, as they must remain a vibrant part of our communities. I am thrilled to see CSG and NACO come together to announce this important initiative, which would provide much-needed help to help counties, as they work together to reduce the number of incarcerated adults suffering from mental illness. I also want to talk about the work that we're doing here in Washington. I am proud to have introduced the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Act, or JMHCA, in the Senate. The JMHCA would reauthorize the Mentally Ill Offender Treatment and Crime Reduction Act, or MIOTCRA, and make some improvements to that law. As Congressman Nugent said, our legislation would support mental health courts and crisis intervention teams that are proven to save both lives and taxpayer dollars. It would emphasize the use of evidence-based practices in mental health treatment and support programs that are proven to reduce recidivism. It would also provide investments in veterans treatment courts, which are instrumental in addressing the unique needs of veterans who are more likely to suffer from PTSD or medicate that and suffer from substance abuse and other debilitating conditions. Our bill has the support of more than 250 organizations. Many of you are here today, along with 54 sponsors in the House and 38 co-sponsors in the Senate. It's very, very bipartisan in the Senate. Where I lead the bill, there are 14 of our co-sponsors are Republicans. And the provisions and programs supported by our bill make a real difference. Crisis intervention training. Now, I know our law enforcement folks here know crisis intervention training, but in case there's someone here who doesn't know what it is, it's telling law enforcement and corrections people as well to recognize when they're entering a situation that involves someone with a mental illness. And we've seen just recently people killed who shouldn't have been killed because the officer didn't recognize that this was a mental health situation. And I went to Columbia Heights, which is a suburb on the north side of the Twin Cities, and talked to police. The whole department, the sheriff's department, had gotten crisis intervention training. And the county attorney was there, and the sheriff couldn't be there. So he said to me that the sheriff had gotten the crisis intervention training, and the next day he didn't kill the guy because he understood the situation. So we had a round table, and I said, well, let's just get a more garden variety story other than I didn't kill a guy that next day. So there was a policewoman there. I just asked, can you give me just a garden variety day experience on using crisis intervention training? She said, well, yeah, about 3 months ago, I was on the street, and I heard a woman yelling, screaming, and she was screaming at a guy, and I went to find out what was going on, and she went over to this railing that was next to there was a playground pretty far down from it, and she threatened to let go and drop, and maybe to her death, but definitely very, very serious injury. And I recognized this was definitely a mental health situation, and using my training, I was able to talk her down, talk her off the railing, and I started talking to her, and she said that she had been sexually abused when she was young, and that the abuser had left her life, had gone out of her life, and recently, though, had come back. And so I told her where she could get some help. And a couple months later, I was working a street fair. This is the cop talking. And this woman came up to me, found me in the street fair, and she said, thank you, you saved my life. And I said, okay, that's your garden variety story. And she said, yeah. She said, this is something I use like every day. And I remember her saying, I'll holster a gun maybe once in my career, but this is something I use every day. So this kind of work is really important. It's really important. And we are going to push our legislation in the next Congress to get it across the finish line. We had somebody with a hold on it in this Congress who's leaving. someone else has a hold on it who we think we can get that off. But I will keep, I will keep fighting in the Senate alongside Congressman Nugent in the House and others who are serious about addressing these issues, this package of issues. And we need your help. We need your help getting this done next year, which I really believe we can do. I now have to go back to a hearing in the Senate, but I want to thank you again for having me here today. Thank you.
And again, thank you, Senator Franken, for your leadership, for the bipartisan approach to this problem that is on the minds of so many of us around this country. I'm going to get an opportunity to talk a little bit about the factors that contribute to the overrepresentation of mental illness within our jails and correctional settings at this point in time. In knowing what drives these rates, it allows us to think about interventions that might mitigate the likelihood of that individual returning to those settings. And there are a number of factors that contribute to it. Obviously, first of all, you have to be arrested at higher rates. That occurs in part because of those high rates of co-occurring disorders I was discussing with you earlier, which may be the reason for an individual being arrested for possession or sales, but it certainly complicates their life both inside and outside and adds to the likelihood of their return. We have an affordable housing crisis in this country with homeless people on our streets, with an overrepresentation of mental illness in that segment of our population as well. Upwards of a quarter of those individuals may have a serious mental illness, homeless person, a very visible person in our communities, also increasing the likelihood of arrest. For those individuals that get arrested, they stay longer. Same charges, same sentence if you have a mental illness than if you don't. Sometimes related to the difficulty in getting bail, paying bail, sometimes evaluations that are necessary to contribute to the defense, but much longer stays within those institutional settings. It is also the case that there's been limited access to some of the healthcare services that might make a difference in stabilizing that intervention. And so many of our individuals that enter into our correctional facilities have no health insurance. And without that ticket, many doors aren't available that may address those conditions responsible for their arrest. And when they get into those settings, sometimes they don't get the benefit of science, so that the evidence-based practices that we know that are associated with stability and recovery aren't applied in a way or aren't available to them so they can move forward in their own lives and stay out of contact with the criminal justice system. And once in, they come out. We've heard about the revolving door. Judge Leifman described it over and over again, repeated arrests. And we know that for individuals with mental illness, that door spins faster than those without. Not necessarily for new offenses, sometimes related to violating conditions of release, but nonetheless, they come back more often. And lastly, as a contributing factor, our literature is helping us understand that those individuals, just like you and I, with risk factors for arrest, those individuals with mental illness have these risk factors. They don't spend time with the right people. They don't think in a way that's consistent with law and order. They may have those co-occurring substance use disorders. All of these contribute to their risk of return to jail and prison settings. So it's challenging, and our counties are on the front lines of this challenge. And there is complexity in their world, and I'm learning that from county leadership that's helped me understand how complicated this can be. Criminal justice oversight in our counties is not consolidated as it may be in state government. And there may be competing priorities, or there may be duplication of services or gaps between services, or city and counties that have different responsibility for different parts of city management. Data is really hard to come by. So we've been tossing around a lot of numbers here during this morning, but systematic and valid screening and assessment doesn't often occur within our jail settings. And we are interested in this initiative in driving the prevalence of mental illness in our jails down. The only way you know that is to have a baseline number and see if the interventions that you then design make a difference in that. Jails are this churning environment, very complicated. Half the individuals will be gone within 72 hours. So it really creates an intense situation with a need to gather information quickly, put it together in a meaningful way, and develop release plans that link folks with service and supervise them to ensure that they adhere to their conditions. Oftentimes, we have unrealistic expectations of some of our key programs, and I'm going to talk in a moment about the thousands of bright lights that are out there. So we get a mental health court established in a community, one of our evidence-based interventions that may serve 50 or 100 defendants with mental illness, very important, but that's just a fraction of the defendants that come through the jail door that need a service. And so we can't expect a small program like that to actually make a big difference in the rates that we've been discussing. Stigma is pervasive, okay, and that the stereotyping of people with mental illness, the false associations with violence, are attitudes that are carried on in much of our public. So too, though, is that stigma that we often experience in working with an individual that has a criminal justice background. And many of our behavioral health providers have a misunderstanding of their track and the reasons in which they find themselves in trouble and the second chances they need to stay out of trouble. There also is a lack of behavioral health resources. Our friends at the National Association of State Program Directors Research Institute estimate about $5 billion taken out of public funding for mental health services in the last several years. That creates real gaps in services and reduced capacity. So we have a workforce that isn't sufficient, and that workforce may not be trained in a way to develop interventions that are targeted to those reasons why people find themselves in trouble. I work in a homeless shelter in Charleston. Almost universally, everybody has spent time in the jail. Almost universally, no one wants to go back there. We have an obligation to help people reach those goals and objectives by providing appropriate services. So, we have innovation to build on. And I'm showing a map of the grantees from the Bureau of Justice Assistance and our Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program and our Second Chance Act. Now over 1,000 of these points of light at this point in time, with additional funding coming from other federal agencies like HHS, from the states, from the counties, from private foundations, all showing us that with, and I love the earlier comment Representative Nugent made, a little bit of common sense and a little bit of good planning can really effectively use our scarce resources toward the ends that we all value and care about. It is the case that we have an opportunity to do things differently along the criminal justice continuum. So, at the point of contact with police, and we've heard a lot of those examples to date, and I really am so proud to be associated with Judge Leifman and the terrific crisis intervention team training that he has sponsored within Miami-Dade as an example. We have many new mental health courts in our community, a handful in the late 90s, over 500 at this point in time, Ohio, Illinois, promulgating throughout the country. We have new efforts to train our correctional staff, our community correction staff. North Carolina has reinvested significantly in training their community correction officers to recognize, work with individuals with mental illness, reduce their likelihood of returning to jail. And our behavioral health community is stepping up in ways as well. New York City has vastly expanded access to cognitive behavioral therapies that are associated with reducing those risks I was alluding to earlier. The problem is, not any one community has enough, and not any one community has brought them to scale. And that's the challenge we're laying out before you here. We had an opportunity with federal funding and many of the partners in this room to develop a framework of working with individuals with behavioral disorders in our criminal justice system, based on three principal dimensions. We can measure risk and that likelihood of returning to criminal justice settings, and we can do that with tools that array people along a continuum from low to high. We also understand that not all substance use disorders, so prevalent in our criminal justice populations, are alike. And we need to understand that in a clinical way from those that don't abuse, to have abuse problems, and maybe even meet criteria for dependence. And so too, not all mental illnesses are alike. This year, any one of us, 16% of us, may experience a mental illness. There is also then that subgroup that is disabled to agree by that mental illness, about 5%, and even beyond that, severe mental illness in about 2.5%. In order to respond appropriately to individuals that come through our settings, we need to know where they exist on this continuum of risk. We need to know where they exist on this continuum of substance use disorder, where they exist on this continuum of mental illness. And with that assessment data, we then can define groups of individuals that get differential responses. It's a very complex and heterogeneous group we're talking about today. And everyone is an individual and requires an individual assessment strategy with appropriate tailored supervision and treatment responses in the community. So we're smarter. How do we then sort of take that smartness and translate it into systemic change? We believe that it starts with county leadership establishing a team of stakeholders with the goal of reducing prevalence. Let's have a metric that we can hang our hat on. Let's have a measure that says we're doing the work that needs to be done to achieve our goal of reducing prevalence. We need to obtain those numbers, though. Not a simple task, I'm reminded over and over again. Systematic screening and assessment with valid tools to establish what those needs are need to occur in vastly larger numbers than they currently do at this point in time. We then have to understand the treatment and services in our communities, what's available, who's eligible for it, what are the gaps, and how are we going to fill those gaps to assure that that individual gets what they need to achieve their goals and objectives, make a plan with measurable outcomes, implement this research that we've been alluding to over and over again, and design these evidence-based interventions in a way that support that individual's tenure within our community settings, and track the progress. Let's understand in a real way whether we're making a difference. So I think as we've heard from speakers before me, and I will echo it, the status quo is not acceptable. We have research and information that suggests what needs to be done, in what way, and I think the time is now for all of us to put our shoulders to the wheel to make that happen. So thank you very much. I now want to turn it over to Commissioner Brown. I am introducing you, Commissioner Brown. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your leadership in Franklin County. It's one of the counties that is working hard to put together a plan to address issues, and I really want to commend you on your leadership and appreciate you for being here. Please join me in welcoming Commissioner Brown.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. I am Marilyn Brown, and imagine this for a minute. Imagine it's a Friday evening, about 5 o'clock, and my policy director, Michael Daniels, and I decide we're going to take a tour of our downtown Columbus jail. And I have to admit, I had never before been in the downtown jail. I had been at our other jail. We have two in Franklin County. So we go into the downtown jail, which is vintage 1950, 1955. It's a horrible facility. We're replacing it. Go in there, and there's somebody that's been brought in on maybe a DUI, I believe, and was in a holding cell and was in a restraint suit because he was viewed to have a problem that needed to be assessed by the mental health provider in the county that the sheriff contracts with. So again, you hear it's Friday about 5 p.m. That mental health provider is not coming until Monday. This is somebody that's been just arrested. Somebody's not coming in to assess until Monday. The weekend ticks on until Monday, until an assessment is made. In my assessment, that's unacceptable. It doesn't appear to be unacceptable to our law enforcement folks and to our judges who seem to know this is happening. I think it's unacceptable. My office thinks it's unacceptable. Until now, we had no real teeth or information to do something different. We now have information that's coming our way, and I want to thank the Justice Center at the Council of State Governments and NACO for giving us some tools that we can use at the county level because we desperately need those tools. I also want to thank our Congress and specifically Senator Franken and Senator Portman for doing the work that they're doing to make sure that we get funding, because I believe that one of the answers we have to look at is making sure that some of the folks, like this gentleman that got into the jail and didn't get assessed and was in restraints, I believe, the entire weekend, don't even enter that facility, but instead get assessed by trained officers who get that crisis intervention training. I believe that every officer on the street should have that training. I believe that there are many of the people that are in our jails now should never enter the facilities. I believe that we need to do better. We have to do better. For community safety, we must do better. For community economics, we must do better, because we're paying a huge cost in our budgets at the county level to house folks who should never be in the jail. We could better use that money in ways that give people appropriate treatments, in mental health treatment, in drug and alcohol abuse treatment, get them treated appropriately when they're assessed by an officer on the street who's doing community policing, who understands what their role is. And I believe it's the right thing to do. We're talking about people's lives, and I think that's what, we've heard a lot of statistics, we've heard a lot of good data, but we're talking about an individual's life, and we need to keep that in mind as we go through many, many more discussions like this. We're talking about somebody's life day in and day out, how they're living their life, and whether we're going to treat them appropriately in mental health treatment, in alcohol and drug abuse treatment, because right now, as you've heard from Dr. Osher, the people that are in the jail that are not doing any more serious crime are spending more time in the jail because they have mental illness, or because they have mental illness and drug and alcohol abuse problems. That's not a reason to keep people incarcerated. We need to get appropriate treatment, not keep them in the jails. So with that, this is the beginning of a long discussion. And I am not here to give answers. I am here to just say I want to thank everybody for being here and to introduce a couple of speakers that represent their various roles with the National Alliance of Mental Illness. And my first speaker that I'd like to introduce is Mr. Peyton Blau, who... Bill Carruthers is first. Okay, well, come on up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Bill Carruthers, and they told me up here that it's against the rules to smile, so I don't want any of y'all to break the rules. My name is Bill Carruthers, and I'm a person in long-term recovery. And what that means is that I'm living my recovery out loud. What that means is that this is a monumental day in my life, and yours as well. My name is Bill Carruthers. I'm a person in long-term recovery. What does that mean to you? That means, well, first of all, it means they let me in here. You don't have to worry about the TVs, and your purses are safe. Before my recovery, who was I? I was all of those horrible, hideous, scary things that you were listening to them talk about. I was that in spades. Not only on the outside, but I was that on the inside too. Not only did you believe that's who I was, but I believed that's who I was. And it was a hopeless, helpless, scary, horrible place. And I was there for 40 years. I don't know how old you are, but 40 years is a long time to be there. It's a long time to be anywhere, but it's really a long time to be there. Today, my name is Bill Carruthers. I'm a person in long-term recovery. I'm on the board of directors for NAMI Georgia. I'm on the board of directors for NAMI Savannah. I'm the director of a peer program where I provide frontline services to one of the most difficult populations. Imagine that. I'm also a certified peer specialist, a certified addiction recovery empowerment specialist. I'm CIT certified. Now, you wonder, why is he telling us that? I'm telling you that because the only reason I'm that is because you're here. Because those things that we're talking about putting into place to change lives, when they change lives, those people will end up standing right here, looking at you. The evidence that what we're talking about, it just ain't talk. If we put the boots on the ground, the rubber to the road, or whatever the appropriate term is up in these parts. Down in Savannah, Georgia, at Savannah Counseling Services, man, I just call it recovery, man. You know, today I've committed my life to that process for other people. And I'm speaking a kind of unconventional language, but it reaches people on the inside. And that's what we got to do. We just can't talk to people's face and let it bounce off their face. We got to speak into the core of their beings. Because I can tell, man, these guys are smart. You know, you all right, Mike? You all right? You breathing? Okay, yeah, these guys are smart, man, because what they're saying is right. That's the answer. I was sitting here saying, oh, they know. You know, I thought I was going to come up here and tell them. They know, man. Those are the answers. And ultimately, to be successful, though, we're going to have to get the people we serve to buy into that. And we do some real great marketing. Everybody knows what the latest tablet is and how to buy a phone, but we're going to have to get that same message to the people who need it. Not just us, we need it, but the people who need it. If they don't know it exists, if they don't know recovery is real, if they don't know they could change, I remember people used to tell me all the time, you need to get your stuff together. I didn't know what together looked like. I thought together was not going to jail that day. I thought that was successful. But it wasn't. We've got to get this message of what we're doing into people that are in trouble, people who are in the system. We got to make them understand where can they go. Where is this road leading to? Where does recovery lead to? I know that when I came into treatment, the treatment language was so scary to me that I kind of wanted to risk just staying where I was. And I wish I could tell you I had a burning bush moment or epiphany. I just got too old. You know? And they saturated with the community, with law enforcement. Yeah, that's what changed me. But we don't want that to be what has to change our whole system. This needs to become a living, breathing thing inside people so they can come into recovery and tell other people and grab people by the hand to change our thing. So that's where the certified peer specialist thing comes in. When I came into recovery, I had an extensive criminal history spanning 4 decades, right? Okay, and that was a very, very overwhelming prospect as far as trying to become employed. And a lot of people, when you tell them get your act together, they say to themselves, well, what am I going to do? Work at McDonald's or work at the labor pool for the rest of my life? That's not optimism. That's not hopeful. But to be able to build Medicaid services, to be able to become part of this system, to be able to partner with people to change their lives, that'll motivate people. That'll give people something to do with their time. That'll give all those consequences that I had a value, because I didn't know what was ever going to happen. Are these mics working? Yeah. See, I wanted to give all those consequences a value. Today they do have a value. They were valuable enough. What we have to do is we have to get people to be able to believe that you can make it. And I wish I would have had the PowerPoint that you could have seen me before. You follow me? Because if you could have saw me before, you couldn't believe this now. The only reason that you could is because you've seen it actually happen. You can because you've seen it actually happen. But there are families and people out there that don't know. And when I came in and I was in NA and AA and all that, and I stumbled into a NAMI, they told me, you need to go to the NAMI meeting. And I went to a NAMI meeting, and I realized, I said, these ain't dope things, they're human beings. I didn't know anything about human beings, though. I used to have human beings for lunch. right? And I got exposed to human beings. And I said I was CIT certified. I remember when me and law enforcement, man, treatment broke my back. It tased me, it humiliated me, it degraded me, and I was scared of it. You follow me? I was so scared that if I saw you coming, I was going to pick up something. And that's what's happening in our world today. We got to change that. And I'm willing to stand up with you wherever you want to go, and we can change it, okay? I believe that we're going to have to lead by attraction. This is going to have to be, this can't be rocket science for the people we're serving. Because if it's rocket science, the only people that are going to reach the recovery destination are people that have a rocket or rocket scientists. Very small portion of the subculture exists inside that parameter. I also believe that this is a journey that's going to be very difficult to take alone. We all know that because all of us want it. Everybody in this room wants what we're talking about, but trying to do it by yourself, you can't do it. We're going to have to come together, all of us, and not come together exclusionary, but inclusionary. Because today I realize your strength. I need your strength. Because I've been on the front line, and I got one phone calling CIT officer, and I got another phone calling mobile crisis, with my supervisor on another phone. It's going to take us all. It's take a village to get this child. This child is sick. It's take a village to re-raise him. All I want to say is this. I came a long way. And you breathing, Mike? Okay, I came a long way, and I wanted to keep Mike breathing, and I wanted you guys, I know we're time sensitive, so I want to say one thing that's very important. My name is Bill. I'm a person in long-term recovery, and I want to thank you. I want to thank you. I mean, sincerely, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for everything that you've ever done for anybody, for every good thing you did, even if you did it by mistake. I want to thank you for it anyway, because you changed my life, and I love you, man. Thank you.
Oh, Peyton Blow, come on up. It's your turn. It's so good to meet you. Nice to meet
you too. Wow. Thank you, Bill. He had to go catch a flight and went first. Good afternoon. My name's Peyton Blau, and I have bipolar type 1 disorder. And I just want to thank you deeply from the bottom of my heart for allowing me to be here today. The man who stands before you right now has a criminal record. But I'm not your average guy with a criminal record. I am what I'm going to call today a medical criminal. What is a medical criminal? Maybe we're coining that today. I'll tell you, I am a criminal because of the medical condition of mental illness. And it has zero to do with my character. I'm lucky. I'm one of the lucky ones. As you know, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, as was been showed today, who are behind bars because of the behavior that was caused by a medical condition of mental illness. Now, you might ask, what are we going to do? You know, we went from the 500,000 hospital beds to the 40,000 beds, and now our counties have largest facilities or jails for mentally ill. We can't just let them all out on the street. It's exactly what we do. Only they're more screwed up when they get out than when they went in. I know this all too well firsthand from the advocacy work I've been doing the last couple of years in South Carolina. So it's mind-blowing to me that y'all, Congress, well, this is it. This is what we're doing. We got to get behind these programs that prevent problems, they improve lives, and they save us money while making our communities safer. The true crazy thing here today is not me. It's the system that we got today. Sometimes, and I come from a conservative background, my dad was a Baptist preacher, went to a conservative Christian school, and but this idea that we can't spend any new money, we gotta spend some money sometimes. Spending a dime can save a dollar if it's spent properly. So, the one program that I'm most familiar with that's very close to my heart is CIT, or Crisis Intervention Teams. And around 5 years ago, I was on probation for charges I received during one of my bipolar, manic, paranoid, delusional states. I read about a man in our community who was tased by the police on his way to the hospital. He died. Like my community, I was outraged. I called my elected officials to offer a solution that I had learned about through NAMI called Crisis Intervention Teams. I knew that could have been me that died that day. You see, I've been tased, I've been pepper sprayed, I've been batoned, I've been taken to jail, where 3 days later, without receiving my meds, I received a felony under suicide watch for threatening. I have 2 felonies in this country. One was for spitting at an officer, and the other one was for threatening an officer. I was arrested 6 different times in a delusional, paranoid state of mind. I remember believing that the police were there to kill me, not help me. I wanted police and jail guards to understand the reality of the delusions that had gone through my mind during my temporary psychotic states. 3 of those 6 arrests went relatively well, where the police got me in custody safely, and 3 were extremely violent, because in my head, I was fighting for my life. What made the difference was experienced officers that when faced with this complicated and difficult challenge, which it's hard to understand this, I was always accused of drugs. I've never used a drug in my life other than prescribed ones. The officers that knew how to connect with me and work with me to de-escalate and understand what I was going through. So people listen. I actually got to start sharing my story and role-playing during the 40-hour CIT training classes with local police. It was life-changing for me to start talking about my story in efforts to save lives in my community. I now have spoken to thousands of people on this subject, and it has been one of the best things ever to help me personally on my continuing journey of recovery. But the first time I shared a story of my arrest, arrest gone well, arrest gone bad, the guy that did it well was sitting back there. And we got up and hugged in front of everybody. And he took me to jail, so I received that felony. That was that night. He said if there would have been an opportunity to take me someplace besides an ER or a jail, he would have loved to have taken that. If he was sitting right here, he would say that today. I appreciate Mike Ford, and he speaks with me now. He's retired. Unfortunately, the handful of communities that are helping people like me by implementing mental illness programs don't make the news quite like the communities that have horrible tragedies take place. It's very apparent right now, hands up. We need to get our heads up, do what needs to be done. The numbers, the data, it's here. We just got to educate people. We got to fight the stigma. We got to educate people to do the right things. CIT is just one example of the many programs that can turn tides in our communities. Another one is mental health court. I went through that myself as well. I had to go see a judge every week for a year, and it just helped me to understand my illness, helped me to learn about cognitive behavioral therapy, medications, etc. I'm here. I'm lucky to be here. I'm here because of people like yourselves that did fight for years for these kind of programs that helped me. Because of God, because of my wife, because of people and a support system that's gotten into my life. So I represent individuals today living with a mental illness who cannot be here. Hundreds of thousands of men and women behind bars, men and women in hospitals, and even those who have tragically passed on. That guy that got tased in my community, his mom called me 2 days ago. She said, if there's some way Andrew's life, Mrs. Torres called me, Andrew Torres, when he died, when I saw it in the news, and I said, we got to do something. If you could mention his name, because I don't want his death to be in vain. I want it to continue. And it's helped over half of our police force get trained one of the most percentage-wise trained in the nation. I'm here to represent hope, to show you that people who are suffering can become productive citizens, and to let you know that we need your help more than ever to make a change. I just want to end with actually a verse of Scripture. Proverbs 31:9 says, "Speak up, judge fairly, and defend the rights of the poor and needy." Thank you.
To Bill and Peyton, thank you very much for telling your story. It's very courageous, and we really appreciate it. For those of you that are congressional staff, we would invite you to join us. I'm sure our county sheriffs and the other parts of county government would welcome the opportunity to give you a tour. When I grew up, my stepfather who raised me was a district attorney and a county judge, and the sheriffs actually protected our house. We actually, as children, were really allowed to go near the county jail or the county courthouse to protect our family. Our phone number was unlisted. We kind of kept a low profile. And it wasn't until I took this job where our president 2 years ago, Chris Rogers, a commissioner from Douglas County, Nebraska, made us, as NACO staff, tour county jails all across America. One of the first jails we toured was Cook County, Chicago, Illinois. In 1971, Cook County had one jail. Today they have 12. 1971, they had one jail. Today they have 12. It's a campus. Society hasn't changed, but the laws have, and how we deal with those problems certainly has. So we are pleased for NACO and the Council of State Governments to announce this initiative today at the national level with many partners who we will go through. And really what we're trying to do is tackle this issue of adults with mental illness and co-occurring substance abuse conditions in our jails and to try and stem the tide. One thing we want to make clear is county governments and the different parts of county government are tackling this every day. But this is an issue of such national significance that we need a partnership with our federal, state, and local partners, as well as the nonprofits, the religious community, and others, the faith community, to tackle this, including the families. So we aren't here to whine that it's beyond us. We're asking for help, and we're looking for some solutions. As part of this initiative, we're going to focus on evidence-based, data-driven strategies. We're going to really focus on collaboration. We're going to focus on how can we bring these great ideas like Pinellas County, Miami-Dade County, and others to scale and to build a peer network. Michael Thompson runs the CSG Justice Center, has spent his whole career on these issues and others related to justice issues. We're very pleased to be partnering with the National Alliance for Mental Illness, the major county sheriffs, the National Sheriff's Association, the National Association of State Mental Health Directors, the National State Alcohol and Drug Addiction Directors, the National Association of County Behavioral Health and Development Disability Directors, the National Council for Behavioral Health, Policy Research Associates, as well as the American Psychiatric Foundation, and many others. A very diverse group. Many of these groups have been working on these issues for years. They're professionals, they're practitioners. What CSG and NACO want to bring is the local elected officials as well as the state elected officials to the table to provide political leadership with our federal partners to elevate this issue. We want to make clear that our partners work on this every day. The alphabet soup of our coalition partners, they are working on this for decades, if not hundreds of years or over 100 years, and we want to lend our political support to this issue. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Michael Thompson to talk about the specifics of the agenda and the initiative and call on you to join us.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks again to all of you for being here today. You've heard the terrific commitment that exists from NACO and its CEO and its members to this issue. The Council of State Governments is equally committed. We're thrilled to have our CEO here today, David Atkins, as well as the Vice Chair of our board, who's going to, I know, talk later, John Wetzel, the Secretary from the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, and then to have all these fantastic partners that Matt just went through by name. The purpose of today's event has been, number one, just to underscore what all of you know, which is what an acute challenge counties and states face, and some of the progress and lessons that we've learned. That was goal number one. We certainly, I think, done that. Goal number two has been to demonstrate the bipartisan leadership that exists for this topic, and you've certainly seen evidence of that with some of the members speaking from Congress. The third is to announce this initiative that we're talking about today, this Stepping Up initiative that you hopefully have a two-page summary of it was when you walked in the door. And this initiative really has three components to it. The first is a national call to action, which we'll be talking about in more detail in the months to come, where we talk about counties really receiving the kinds of tools and responding to ideas that we think will put them on a path towards reducing the numbers of people with mental illness in their jails. So that's component number one. Component number two is recognizing it's not enough just to call people to action. You need to provide them with the support and the resources to really position them to achieve those goals. And so we're talking about the partner groups that Matt mentioned, and NACO and the Council of State Governments Justice Center, providing technical assistance to these different counties. We're talking about remote technical assistance because, as Matt mentioned, we're talking about thousands of counties, and each county is unique. We're also talking about the possibility of intensive technical assistance to particular counties. You heard Commissioner Brown refer to some of that and the numbers they've gotten in Columbus, Ohio. The third element of this is a national summit that we look forward to convening, where we bring together teams from counties that clearly are not only committed to this, have not only signed up for this call to action, but are actually taking step forward to implement the plan. So the three things that you should be on the lookout for over the coming months that we and our partners will be moving forward on is this call to action, this delivery of technical assistance, and this national summit. It builds on the terrific support that the Bureau of Justice Assistance has provided to us through the Justice Mental Health Collaboration Program and the wonderful grantees that Dr. Osher identified earlier, as well as private foundations from the Langeloth Foundation and the Meadows Foundation. Certainly, American Psychiatric Foundation has been a terrific partner in this, and we're extremely grateful for their support. So that's a rough rundown of the initiative. We've been talking about, for those of us in this room, this issue for a long time. Why is this special? Why is this different? I think what's going to be different about this is we're talking not just about pilot programs, not about a particular policy change. We're talking about actually measuring how many people with mental illness are in jails and then trying to actually reduce that. Overall numbers impact. That's a big change, a big shift, and it's a huge step forward, and I want to thank again NACO and all the partners here, and it's just great to have folks from local sheriff's offices, Loudoun County. Thank you for showing up in force. We're thrilled to have you here. So with that, Matt, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. And our next speaker, I just mentioned the Major County Sheriff's Association and the terrific relationship we have with them. Our next speaker represents law enforcement, represents sheriffs everywhere and Major County Sheriff's Association. She is the sheriff in Bexar County, Texas. For those of you who don't know what Bexar County is, that's San Antonio. That's the 7th biggest city in the United States. And we're thrilled to have Sheriff Susan Pomerleau with us. You've all heard the expression, don't mess with Texas, right? Heard that all the time. Let me tell you, don't mess with Sheriff Pomerleau. Sheriff Pomerleau is not only a terrific law enforcement professional, but she is also a 30-year career veteran of the Air Force, where she rose to the rank of Major General, and we are delighted the kind of leadership that she's providing in San Antonio to tackle this issue. Please join me in welcoming the Sheriff from San Antonio.
Thanks very much. I really appreciate it. Good afternoon, and I'm really pleased to be here, but especially that there are so many who really are focusing on this issue in our communities, because jails are not the place to have people with mental illness. And I'm privileged to lead the 11th largest sheriff's office in the nation and also oversee the operations of the Bexar County Adult Detention Center, and it's the 16th largest jail in the nation. We have a capacity of 4,563, and right now today we were just under 4,000. And of those 4,000, 800 plus are being treated for some level of mental illness. So it's not just a coincidence that the major county sheriffs association, the National Sheriff's Association, the Sheriff's Association of Texas, and many other states have as their #1 legislative priority mental illness, funding for mental illness in our jails. So the nation's jails have really become de facto mental institutions where law enforcement increasingly is relied upon to deal with individuals suffering from those mental health issues. And that's not what jails were designed for. And so it's frustrating when we invest the dollars into mental health programs in the jails, and then we see those people coming back time and again. So these issues are especially prominent in major counties where the problems are exacerbated based on the size, the population size of the jurisdiction, and the size of our jails. But I also think of smaller jurisdictions who simply don't have the resources that we do in major metropolitan areas. So law enforcement officers see and deal with significant problems stemming from mental health issues during routine policing. And unfortunately, many counties are ill-equipped or untrained or hampered by law from adequately and appropriately dealing with individuals who arrive in jail suffering from mental illness. And I will tell you personally, my brother was bipolar, but that was in the 60s and the 70s before we even knew what lithium was to control those chemical imbalances. So I have a personal stake in this. And some departments may even have facilities that temporarily hold individuals with mental health issues. And they often don't have access to case histories, to medical history of those individuals so that we can respond to their respective situations beyond just temporary custody. And often individuals suffering from these mental health disorders also have co-occurring substance abuse or failure to take prescription medication. And as I mentioned, today in the Bexar County Jail, we have 800 plus who are being treated for mental illness. And that's anywhere from personality disorders to those disorders that can be treated with psychotropic drugs so they can be in the general population, all the way to full-blown psychoses where they are housed in what is proverbially called the padded cell with a paper smock. And they're there because they're at risk of hurting either themselves or other people. And in jails, we are not authorized to force medication. We can't do that. So if they refuse medication, then there is a decline in their circumstances, and they may go from general population to being in the mental health unit. So 21% of those who are booked into our jail in San Antonio have a mental health history. And in Bexar County, 22% of the inmates in our jail are being treated for mental health, 8% for serious mental health issues. And for University Hospital that provides our medical and mental health care in the jail, $2.2 million annually is spent just on psychotropic drugs. And almost 60% of the adults who are admitted to the Bexar County Jail who have been diagnosed with a mental illness have been arrested for 5 times or more. So Bexar County has been recognized nationally for our pioneering efforts to divert people from jails into community-based programs. we continue to refine and introduce new programs aimed at providing those community-based programs and hopefully and are breaking the cycle of criminality and repeat offenders. And I have to say, to hear Bill Carruthers and you, Mr. Blau, to hear your passion and to see firsthand, God bless you for what you've come through and what you represent today and how you represent the challenges that we have in our jails today. I hope each one of you was moved by their remarks. But it takes collaboration of every stakeholder: law enforcement, the courts, the district attorney, the regional mental health authority, and leaders at all levels. And the Bexar County Misdemeanor Mental Health Court is producing promising results. 17% recidivism rate for those participating in that mental health court. A 26% rate, 9 points higher for the comparison group. So it works. Law enforcement has to be involved because they're usually the first to respond and the first to see the challenges on the street. And crisis intervention training is essential. And let me tell you the experience that we've had in Bexar County, and I know it's mirrored other places. In 2009, our mental health unit, 15 law enforcement officers, were trained 40-hour crisis intervention training course. Prior to that time, on an annual basis, we had to use force at least 50 times annually as we took mental health consumers into custody. After that training was given to those 15 officers, in over 5.5 years, we've only had to use force 2 times. Once in 2012 and once about 8 months ago. And if that is not proof, evidence-based proof, that crisis intervention training is essential, I don't know what is. And thankfully, that saved you and others. So we are undertaking an initiative in Bexar County to assess, to do a mental health screen on every single person who is arrested in our county. Because of the 110,000 arrested just this year, only 65%, or 65,000, 58%, are actually booked into jail where we've been doing a comprehensive mental health screen. But those 42% that haven't been screened, the only reason they would be screened is if they were symptomatic. But we know in that 45,000 people, there are mental health issues that are simply not addressed. So by providing the kind of interventions that are necessary to get them into treatment as a condition of pretrial release, to get them into the kinds of programs and the medications that they need, we will prevent them from coming to jail a second time and help them be productive citizens, just as you've heard here. So we work closely with the Meadows Foundation, with the Bureau of Justice Assistance, because they established what the research to really help focus us on where we need to put our efforts. And so the primary challenges that we still need to tackle are identifying early those who are arrested and are mentally ill, developing appropriate protocols to get them out of jail and provide community-based services, and developing better collaboration between the justice system and mental health authorities to provide the right help for these individuals. And one key piece of legislation that the major county sheriffs support related to this set of concerns is the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Act. If passed into law, it would help departments across the country address some of these challenges. So to close, I want to thank the Council of State Governments, the Justice Center, National Association of Counties, being able to, having the honor to represent major county sheriffs and the National Sheriff's Associations. Thank you very much for your involvement in this. It is important to our nation, not just our individual communities, but across the board. You think of how many people that we affect every day who could be productive citizens in our nation, and think about what we are missing. Thank you so much.
Sheriff, thank you very much. What you're trying to do in Bexar County, this discussion of making sure that screening happens immediately upon initial booking, that's cutting edge. That's something that we're not seeing just about anywhere, and we can't wait to see it in San Antonio first. So thank you very much for all you're doing. We've reached the end of our program, and I'm going to introduce our final speaker, and that is a person who we're thrilled is on our board of directors at the Council of State Governments Justice Center. Earlier today, Congressman Frank Wolf from Pennsylvania, the chairman of the House Appropriations Subcommittee for the Department of Justice, announced the establishment of the Chuck Colson Task Force, which is a group of leaders across the country focusing on the federal corrections system. They asked one state corrections director to serve on that task force, and the person they asked was Secretary John Wetzel. He leads the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, which is a system with 50,000 plus inmates. He's going to talk to you about two things, not only why it's so important to have state government be a partner to counties and not leave counties on their own on this, but also just how appreciative he is of the central role that counties play, because he too was a jail administrator. So please join me in welcoming Secretary Wetzel.
Thank you so much, Mike, for the opportunity to come here. And as Mike said, I've worked as a county jail person for most of my natural life, actually, starting as a correctional officer at age 20, working my way up through the county system. I spent the past 4 years as a Secretary of Corrections in Pennsylvania, the state system. So I probably bring a unique perspective in that. But there's really not much to add to what we've heard. And in particular, I want to thank NAMI, and I want to thank you and Bill, who left. Because I think what gets lost oftentimes, and I just want to bring everybody back for a second, to get away from the numbers and think about the people and think about the humans who are impacted, who have an issue. And if that issue was an imbalance in the amount of sugar in their blood, we'd take them to the hospital. But because that issue is in their mind, we throw them in jail. And that's where we're at. And the numbers support it. And so I would ask you, as Americans, as a country, this is really a value statement. And why I think that this is so monumental is because I think we've all said enough. And I think we're all at a place where we say that our approach, our flawed approach to responding to mental illness is not consistent with our values. But the path forward is not a path that we all take individually, because that's what we've done for the past 30 years, and how's that working out? It's not. It's a path that we need to take together. State and county, people in my position, everything we do is with self-interest, unapologetically. And when we get better outcomes at the county jail where the rubber meets the road, we get less at the state level. And frankly, the county has a better opportunity to keep individuals not just not coming back, but successful, reintegrated with their family, healthy, all the things we want. So this is the absolute perfect place for this initiative to start, at the county jail where the rubber meets the road. And yes, we can say as a value, we don't think mentally ill offenders should come to jail, but they're there. And one thing that jails do better than anyone is that we just deal with whatever we get. And people all the time say, oh my God, we have so many mentally ill in jails, they'll never adjust. My concern is that we will adjust. So for states and counties to partner with folks like NAMI, who's stakeholders around the table, and the vehicle for how we move forward, the vehicle is data and successes. And we've had successes all over the country, but they've been individual and they've been incremental. And the only path to get beyond that, and people talk about reform all the time, we're way beyond reform, folks. The only path to where we need to get to, which is system transformation, is this path right here. So to all of you who are involved, to the folks in Congress, the congressional staffers, we're having some great success in corrections reform around the country. And it's about time we roll up our sleeves, and we want to stay away from this issue because it's so complicated. And Fred laid out in 8 minutes something that could probably be an 8-week course. And it's so complicated, so we've been scared to address it. But the time is now. It's inconsistent with our values, and we have the opportunity, given this mechanism and this structure and this group, to provide leadership, to truly transform our approach to mental illness in America. So thank you, and let's go get some work done.